Alright, it is officially forced merriment season. I mean the holidays. So let's talk about toys. Specifically, let's talk about pink toys. So, okay, let me start by saying something that I don't think qualifies as controversial anymore, but probably still needs clarifying up front in terms of it being a position. Ahem. At least as far as the developed modern world goes, the notion of a broadly applied, cleanly divided red pill, blue pill, yin or yang, Autobot Decepticon binary conception of gender as a social construct seems to be in the early stages of breaking down. And I happen to think that's a pretty good thing. At the very least, it's not a bad thing. Yes, social constructs like gender, family, government, morality, etc. mostly get established for sensible reasons, but they can also change for equally sensible reasons. An especially visible and easily understood aspect of this has been the mounting pop cultural backlash against the concept of the pink aisle, aka the color and subject-coded division in toy shops that rigidly divides the boy stuff from the girl stuff, quote-unquote. It's a flashpoint of modern gender discussion for two basic reasons. It involves children, and it's a really easy way to make the point of how absurdly silly arbitrary gender coding is. Sure, you can imagine that at one point the dolls and domestics are for girls, weapons and tools are for boys thing might have at least had a logic behind it, however retrograde in terms of conditioning the young for their prospective societal roles as adults, but the idea that you can take some completely neutral object and make it for men or for women based on what set of paint you apply, hell, that you can even take the infinite options available and variations in the realms of design and aesthetic and theme, arrange all of it into just two columns, and then align those columns by human sexual characteristics, really when you stop and think about this outside of our shared social conditioning you accept it, it doesn't even sound ridiculous, it sounds stupid. Which is a longish way of saying I understand why the pink aisle has become an easy go-to reference for deriding sexism and unnecessary pressure toward gender stratification in consumer culture. I get it, I basically agree, I support the ideals at play. But I think we're maybe getting to a point where some of the fire is being, well, misdirected. Now, I'm not here to call anybody on the mat or say you're doing this wrong or anything like that, strictly one Bob's opinion. But in this one Bob's opinion, while specific symbols or touchstones are useful for illustrating a point and directing effort, it's important to remember that the vast majority of stuff, as in things, objects, knickknacks, sundries, bric-a-brac, whatever, isn't bad or harmful in itself. Stuff is just stuff. Stuff is neutral. It's the purpose that stuff gets used for that's bad. It's the systems that put stuff to said purposes that are harmful. And if you're fighting to change systems and purposes, I think it's incumbent upon one to take care not to attack or demonize the stuff in place of the real target. In simpler terms, rigid, forcibly maintained gender roles are the disease. The pink aisle is a symptom. But pastel-colored Legos are just pastel-colored Legos. And I'm not trying to be pedantic about this. I think being careless about this distinction has the potential for propagating a whole other strain of harmful social and behavioral issues. See, whether you or I or anyone else likes it, people and especially whole societies are transformed in steps. In this particular case, the world is going to accept girls can like boy stuff and vice versa long before it accepts girl stuff and boy stuff being wholly arbitrary distinctions that never really existed in the first place. For good or for ill, even if you do get everyone and their grandma over the masculine, feminine, blue-pink aesthetic coding, you're not going to erase centuries upon centuries of masculine, feminine coding of other things like tropes, themes, narratives, and characterizations. Those take longer to wash out of the cultural psyche, so you've got to do the good you can within and around them while minimizing collateral damage and friendly fire. And since the notion of pinks and pastels, dolls and domesticity being coded feminine isn't going away anytime soon, I think care needs to be taken that the very positive anti-pink aisle message that traditionally feminine things can be enjoyed by all is not misapplied or misheard as rather more negative traditionally feminine things are bad. And I worry that the seemingly progressive, easy road of just universally condemning the pink aisle or the princess culture or whatever else, however unintentionally, can potentially do just that. Remember, stuff absent an agenda or force behind it is just stuff. Sure, it is awesome that we as a culture are so increasingly eager to celebrate the defying of meaningless gender norms in the form of women and girls who lean in and excel in quote-unquote traditionally masculine spaces, but that doesn't mean and shouldn't mean that we conversely tell the women and girls whose freely chosen interests do trend more toward the pink aisle that somehow makes them lesser or anti-modern or automatically buying into something and being controlled. And while we're at it, it's definitely the opposite of helpful to young boys whose tastes run in that direction. I mean, society is going to be tough enough on them already without forces who should otherwise be on their side giving them the mixed message of, you can like whatever you want, but what you want is actually kinda lame still. Especially since, in what would be deliciously dark irony if it didn't have such poisonous immediate effects, it ends up reinforcing a gender problem that's much more damaging and pervasive than the pink aisle, namely the deeply ingrained centuries-old traditions in myth, fiction, and legend that associate the classically masculine with strength and heroism, while the classically feminine represents evil and weakness. Don't look at me like you don't know what I'm talking about, folks. A lot of character tropes, cliches, formulas, and shorthands are coded male or female. It's not reflective of reality, especially now. It's not good, and it should definitely change, but it goes back really deep. Pandora's box, Adam, Eve, Apple, decades upon decades of male villains we know are villains because they affect effeminate and/or gay mannerisms or visual signifiers. This isn't news. Bells should be ringing. In recent pop culture, you can see it pretty explicitly in the movie 300. Our hero and villain were both men, but we know Leonidas is the unquestioned good guy largely because he embodies positive traits that are visually and thematically coded as traditionally masculine. Leonidas is so macho, he's basically gelatin testosterone squeezed into a man-shaped sausage casing. But the bad guy, Xerxes, what was he like? Xerxes is preening and leering and mincing. He's syrupy and saccharine. He's into jewelry and finery and pageantry. He's touchy and feely, and from the looks of his private pleasure tent, he's, well, not straight, to say the least. There's basically one woman of note in this entire movie, and it still manages to code masculine good, feminine evil. But that's Greek mythology and Frank Miller. You expect it from them. What's really telling is that it shows up in something modern like The Hunger Games, which is held up for good reason as an text of modern young adult feminism, especially in the movies where Katniss' inner monologue isn't generally present, and pretty much everything positive and novel about her boils down to classically masculine character tropes applied to her ostensibly female character. And not just the whole scruffy, taciturn John Rambo in a sports bra thing. Katniss is so macho, she even hates the cat. For f***'s sake, even Clint Eastwood was nice to the cat. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of great women in fiction have been created by grafting female skins onto conventionally masculine archetypes. But then think about how the bad guys are characterized in The Hunger Games. Yup. More mincing, more preening, they gorge on wine and chocolate, they wear makeup and spray tans and frilly costumes. Despite being a female lead, Katniss is coded masculine to be a good guy, while the mostly male villains of the Capitol are coded female. And this is a franchise that's bending over backwards to be positive and inspiring for young women. That is how insidious, residual, and dug-in deep cultural programming like this is, folks. On the other hand, those same Hunger Games movies, or the second one at least, provide a helpful answer for this conundrum. Remember who the enemy is. Yes, I'm on the side of history that says the pink aisle and the whole binary gender separation that it's part of is an arcane relic pushing arbitrary and outmoded societal roles on people who may not want or need them. But that doesn't make Barbie or Princess Peach the bad guys. They're neutral, plastic and pixels, nothing more or less than what we make of them. And when preferred or chosen freely, they're just as capable of bringing imagination, joy, and yes, power to young girls, young boys, young anybody, even if that is a whole lot of pink. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.